And good morning. And I feel like it's kind of like deja vu because I'm back in the gym and I'm doing the same exercises. And that's one of those things that before I started filming my workouts, I was kind of like, well, should I really? Because I do so many of the same exercises. It's kind of like, is there any point in showing you what I'm doing when I do the same things again and again and again? It's like, hey, guess what? I'm squatting today, but I squat 3 times a week. So, the chances of me covering my squats are kind of like a very high percentage because I train 5 days a week and 3 of those 5 days I'm squatting. But it is one of those things that I kind of think a lot of people don't realize. It's like, people, when they contact me for a training program or they're starting a program and they're kind of like, what should I do this week? And then this week, and then this week, and then this week. And it's kind of like, they're wanting to do something different every single week. And for a lot of people, I think that's important in terms of just, they get bored very easily. So they need that variety, whether it's training or their diet. A lot of people need variety. And I think that's where something like CrossFit comes into play, because CrossFit, every single day you're doing something different. And that's simply because the vast amount of skills that they have to cover within CrossFit is so, there's gymnastics, there's powerlifting, there's Olympic weightlifting, there's strength, there's cardio, there's capacity, etc., etc. So, CrossFit might get a lot of hate, but for someone who's looking for variety, it may not be the best thing to kind of like spread yourself so thin around so many different skills without actually learning the discipline of anything. But for just variety and interest in keeping you captivated and motivated, it is a good format. But the majority of the time for bodybuilding and for powerlifting, or especially powerlifting, or if you're focusing on one specific sport, you're going to be doing a lot of the same shit again and again and again and again. And I think it can be comforting as well as boring. Comforting in that, when you're going to the gym, okay, I'm going to be doing this. And when you're not in the mood or you're not feeling 100%, you can just go through the motions, and that's not a bad thing, because not every single day you're going to feel like you can give 100%, and just being able to rely on the movement patterns is a good thing. But it's also really important to, even if you're doing the same thing, to really focus on the movement. And that's why you see me doing a lot of negatives, a lot of time under tension, because I don't just want to do the movement. I want to maximize that movement. And that's why I always stress full range of motion and time under tension and muscle-mind connection, because especially for hypertrophy, where you're trying to isolate a specific muscle, you want to make sure that you're working that muscle directly and you're not just cheating the movement. So for example, say you're doing side raises, but you're shrugging and you're using trap, and then you get the people, and you've met those people who say my traps grow so fucking easily, it doesn't matter what I do, my traps just grow. And it's like, yeah, because you're not doing the other movements correctly. You're cheating all your movements, and instead of working your traps independently when you do shrugs, you're working your traps when you do fucking everything. So suddenly your traps become extremely dominant and strong, and they take over when you're trying to work shoulders and triceps and it's chest. Like you see people doing fucking pec flies and stuff like that, and they're doing this and this, and what they're working? They're working their traps. So it's really important that even if you are just going through the motions, you're making sure you're going through the motions and activating the right muscles. And I can't stress that enough. So anyway, I'm back and I'm doing my combination of Nordics and sissies. And this is so important for me to really isolate my hamstrings. As you know, I tore my hamstring and I've been trying to really rehabilitate it and strengthen it. And that's why I've been doing so many squats, because I feel like I've been able to really get low in my squat, which I never used to do when I was in powerlifting. So I've gotten a lot lower. I've been able to engage my hamstring a lot more, but that's made me realize just how much the left is weaker than the right, and not just that, overall my hamstrings are not strong. And I've always kind of known my hamstrings aren't that strong. I am very quad dominant. But the fact that once upon a time in a land far, far away, I could squat 220 kilograms, 228 kilograms was my max. Yes, I was using straps. For a lot of people who are like, how the fuck did you manage that? I was strapped in. I wasn't just using knee wraps. I was literally strapped. And that's another thing. Wow, my mind's just all over the place. When you're strapping in, okay, when you use knee wraps as opposed to knee straps, knee wraps are like the epitome of cheat in terms of how much more they can give you in a lift. And then, of course, knee wraps, if you're using like an SBD or something like that, they're way tight. If they're nice and tight, they will also give you like 10-20% more on your lift. And then of course raw is your kind of like what your body can do without any assistance. So just be aware of that when you're doing squats and stuff like that. It's kind of like raw will give you your raw number, knee wraps will give you a certain amount extra, and then knee straps will give you a certain amount extra, and then knee wraps are just like going for fucking gold. I'm going to go for max out. Oh, and then of course you get equipped where you're wearing a fucking suit that you have to walk around like this in because it's so tight, and you can barely move, and it just causes that massive reflex and maximizes the squat. Anyway, let me get back to this. So I'm trying to isolate my hamstring, time under tension, and I'm really focusing on body weight movements, simple movements where I can really isolate them, because the heavier you go, the more likely you are to use other muscles. And you know, you'll be surprised, like you're leg pressing or something like that, and you're not just using your legs or in this particular case, you're not just using your hamstrings, you're using your quads, you're using your glutes, you're using your posterior chain, you're using your core, you're using everything. You know, you're pulling and squeezing with the handles. Suddenly you're using more upper body, you're using your fucking traps when you're doing leg press. So, you know, you're using everything. So by doing simple body weight movements, I get to really isolate each element of my muscle. And again, you can do leg curls and leg extensions as effectively. But there's something very humbling about barely being able to do a body weight movement. So humble yourself, as I do repeatedly with my Nordic curls, which I have to do with a band, because I can't do them without. Straight into, like, I don't know what this is, but I call it like a sissy hold. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 8. Oh, right. So I do this, I'm pretty sure I'm doing these slightly wrong because I have my legs quite far apart, but fuck it. I feel like it still works quad and engages the quad. Oh. So I treat this as like more of a, it's not necessarily going to build my legs massively, though it does work them. But for me, it's kind of like I'm strengthening the knees in particular with this one. Because, you know, people always go, it hurts to squat. And, you know, like squatting is a natural movement. You know, when you look at a little baby, okay, you'll see them, these little babies, little toddlers and children, and they're sitting like this. You know, they're just like sitting, like looking around in this position. And somehow, as you get older, obviously you get tighter and you're not moving as dynamically. You're not moving as effectively. And suddenly your range of motion becomes limited and limited. And suddenly, you know, you're 20 years old and the furthest you can get down is kind of like there, and any lower and your knees start to hurt. And people always go, no, you mustn't squat because it'll hurt your knees. But body weight, you know, like is one of those things. This is a natural movement. This is a natural range of motion. And the fact that this hurts your knees is problematic. And the majority of the time, the reason your knees are sore, and I'm not an expert, I'm just going off what's happened to me previously, is like your knees are sore because your quads are sore and your glutes are tight. And your quads are tight and your hamstrings are tight, and that all refers into the knee. And so by doing things like the sissy and the Nordic, I'm strengthening all the areas around the knee. And a good person to follow, if you don't, is knees over toes, because everyone goes, oh, your knees must never go over your toes. And it's like, well, they should. That is a natural, like your knee should be able to bend like this and not fucking hurt. You should be able to sit in this position and not hurt. And, it's quite funny how like you tell someone to get into this position, and when they're either too tight to, or their ankles hurt when they get into this position, or something like that. And it's kind of like, you need to be able to get into these positions because it will just help the health of your body, because no one wants a knee replacement surgery because they haven't, you know, worked their knee effectively. So just make sure, you know, they're not the most glamorous looking exercises, and they're not like, oh, grunt mode, kind of like, I'm fucking awesome, kind of like, let me pump out 5, you know, because 5 reps looks like, you know, it's not like epic, you know, like you do a leg press and you feel amazing. You do this and you're like, oh, wee. I mean, like for me, I am so appreciative of someone with good range of motion and mobility these days. I'm like, I'm like, when I see that, I'm like, that is fucking impressive, you know? So my change of my value on what is amazing has changed over the years, and what I appreciate has changed over the years. And also, like, if you've never tried it, you don't know how hard it is. Okay. Like I was watching this fascinating thing the other day, and they were talking about your unknown unknowns. So you get your known knowns, things that you know, and then you Then you've got the things your unknown knowns, things that you know, but they're so like ingrained into you that you've forgotten you've ever known them. But like suddenly, all of a sudden you'll be talking about something and you remember it and you're like, hey, I know that. But then you get your unknown unknowns. And those are like, for example, if I looked at basketball, like I can't appreciate the sport of basketball because I know so little about it. Yes, I know there's skill involved. Yes, I know, there are people who can master it. But beyond the fact that I know they're really tall, I don't know much about basketball. So therefore, it's an unknown because I don't even know the steps involved in shooting a ball and the finger movements and the whole holding of the ball, etc., etc. And that happens with every sport and every movement. Is kind of like when you look at Olympic weightlifting, a lot of people won't be able to appreciate it because they simply don't know how hard it actually is. And the same goes for mobility and things like that. You may look at it and go, that's easy. I can do that, until you try. And then you're suddenly like, holy shit, my body can't do that. So just remember that, like, there are so many things I think you can watch and you can't appreciate it. So you actually don't realize how hard it is until you try it. And then you're humbled. And for me, the Nordic and the sissy are like two movements that have completely humbled me, because when I saw them, I was like, surely that can't be that hard. And then I tried them and I'm like, oh shit. Like, those are badass fucking movements. People who can do those have a strength that I need and I want, and I'll get there. But it's kind of like those unknown unknowns that when you realize how hard they are, and then you can start to appreciate and get humbled by them. But until you try them, they look easy from afar. So anyway, that is my training so far. So I've been probably putting what I have been doing. So I've done my strict press 4 or 4 this week. I'm feeling a bit better about my strict press. Last week was like, fuck you. It felt heavy. This week's feeling a little bit better. I'm doing my accessories in between my strict press, so back and forth. Obviously, I did my front squats, and I feel like I could have gone slightly heavier with my front squat, but I didn't want to push it because my body is feeling a little bit tired this week. And I don't want to go and kill myself when it's only halfway through the week and I still have a long way to go. So I'm just kind of like listening to my body and being a good girl. I've done my strict press. I've done my squats. I've done a bit of calisthenics, and now I'm moving on to something that I fucking love. Now, if you know me, you know I love supersets because they save time. What better than doing multiple muscle groups at the same time and kind of like ticking off everything at the same time? And this is like really, really hard. Don't underestimate it. So you're holding a Nordic or cis squat kind of position. So you're in this position, right? But you're going to do a pelvic tilt. So you're kind of like, what my favorite way of describing it is, you're kind of like squeezing your bum into your belly button. So you're kind of like tilting, doing a pelvic tilt, squeezing your glutes, squeezing your core. So this is really, really core dominant. And a lot of people always ask me, what is the secret to my abs? And number one is diet. Okay. Because abs are made in the kitchen, and that's not like it is saying for a specific reason. And that reason is because unless your body fat is low enough to reveal your abs, it doesn't matter what exercises you do, they're not going to show. Because if your body fat is like 25, 30, 40%, you're not going to see your abs. And for men, your body fat obviously has to be a lot lower because men generally, it's not always the case, but generally store their body fat in their midsection. So in order for them to reveal their abs, they have to remove all the body fat from everywhere else in their body in order to show their abs. Women often, not always the case again, are luckier because a lot of the time women deposit their fat in their glutes and their legs and their boobs, and they often have less body fat deposited in their midsection, which means they can have a higher body fat percentage and get abs. And, you know, this is one of the things that always annoys me when these influencers, males in particular, say women can't get abs. Is it hard to get abs? Absolutely. Is it impossible? No, because generally women don't deposit a lot of their fat in their midsection. So if they get to like 18, 12%, which could be healthy, could be potentially borderline not healthy, they can start to see abs. And I see plenty of women who have abs and they're at like 18% body fat and they're still extremely healthy. They're still having a regular period, etc., etc. So women actually have it easier than men when it comes to showing their abs. So besides body fat, i.e. what you eat and getting that body fat low enough to reveal your abs, doing compound movements, doing movements that really engage the core is your best bet for working the core. And this one really works your core along with your shoulders, your legs, everything else. So it's just like a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And so I would suggest if you want to work your shoulders, specifically anterior delts for this exercise, this is your go-to. So I fucking love this exercise. I just discovered it, from a calisthenics person. And I'm like, yeah, I'm putting this in my routine. So you got a pelvic tilt, okay? So you're squeezing your bum, you're squeezing your core, you're leaning back, which engage your quads. And this is the hardest part. Like for me, it's like, oh my word, the quad burn is just insane. And then on top of that, so you're leaning back, and whilst you're doing that, okay, you're in a hollow hold position, right? So you're pushing your shoulder blades apart. You're squeezing your shoulder blades together this way, okay? So you're in this position whilst you've got a pelvic tilt, okay? So you're essentially in a hollow hold position. This hollow hold position is strengthening me for calisthenics movements. And then I'm doing front raises, okay? So it's just like every possible exercise combined into one smorgasbord of hideous pain, and I love it. Make sure you squeeze your bum. Ah. My battery died somewhere along the line. I don't know what happened or where I was because I had my eyes closed. So, anyway, welcome back. Okay, so I'm supposed to do 10 and I can never do them unbroken. So that's the one thing about body weight exercise that I find is, when you're fatigued, it's not like machines where you can kind of just like push through or manipulate the movement necessarily. It's like when you can't do anymore, you can't do anymore. So you don't often get that same pump that you can do with machines. And that's okay. I don't mind that, but it's so humbling again. But definitely try this. So I've got like 4 more, I think, and just like feel the burn. Oh, awesome. Right. So I've got to do 4 sets of those. And then I'm going to be doing a bit more core, just because I want to really strengthen that planche position. So I'll film that, and that is today's training. So it is a lot more calisthenics, and a lot of people will go like, well, what about the bodybuilding? And for me, like when it comes to shoulders, nothing beats shoulder training than calisthenics. So, if you want to build some shoulders, do some handstand push-ups, do some pike position push-ups, and just fucking work on your shoulders that way. Strict press, full range of motion, and try these. try these. Okay. Don't underestimate them until you give them a try. And then you'll be like, holy fuck, that is hard. Like, especially if you lean further back. I'm just like, as the more I lean back, the more my quads just are on fire. And it's like shoulders, quads, ass. And you're just like, ooh, which one? You know, which one's worse? Which one's worse? I don't know. It's just like, I love those kind of movements, like where you're just like multitasking and burning everything at the same time. And you're just like tick, 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 tick. You know, like I'm just like, you know, zeroing in on so many different muscles at the same time. And because it's body weight, you know, like I feel like, I don't know, there's something so humbling about body weight and how hard it can be. Like, you can go and do a bench press, and if you're not strong enough to do your body weight bench press, that's okay. But, you know, can you do a push-up? Because you can obviously, you can do an incline, you can do things to make it easier to do a push-up. But a push-up is essentially kind of like a large percentage of your body weight, especially if you start doing decline where you put your feet on an elevated surface. So like for me, I love being functional. And as Seth Rossi says, functional and fuckable, baby. That is the goal. Let's keep on working towards that. Yee.